How many of you in the areas in which you live and worship in your communities, how many of you have heard of the problem that some people are making with the sacred name? Is that something that's in the Philippines and other places? All right. Well, I know in the United States and in other places where I've been, this sacred name has become an issue, and it primarily is because people are uninformed. And so I call it escaping the maze of misinformation. I hope that I can do that. If we got all the way through this, which I don't think we will, but we could finish it at another time perhaps, these are some of the things that we'll go over. The current trends regarding the name, circumlocutions, which is a big word for meaning substituting one name for another. Why the pronunciation of the name is so difficult to ascertain. The Masoretes. I'm going to be describing or defining some words here that you may not be familiar with. The Masoretes were the scribes in the 5th, 6th, and 7th centuries particularly, who gave us the vowel pointing or the vowel marks and the extant Hebrew text of the Tanakh. Most of you know, I think, but I'll just make this explanation. In ancient Hebrew, there were no vowels written. They were just consonants. Now, in some cases, there were consonants. In some cases, there were consonants that were substituted for vowels, but only 3. So it would be like, for instance, if I spelled an English word this way, T-B-L, what word would it be? Table. You all came to table pretty quickly. It could be other things too, but you can see how we can actually read our language without vowels. Well, the Masoretes added the vowels by using little marks, little points, little dashes, and so forth. We'll look at the Church Fathers and the Tetragrammaton. Now, the Tetragrammaton means 4 letters, so that's how the name of God was referred to by some. Yod, He, Vav, He are the Hebrew letters. There's 4 of them. We look at that in the Greek manuscripts. And the heart of the issue, at the end, what I did as I went through this in another time, was to talk about the meaning of the name. What does it mean to call upon the name of the Lord, or the name of Yod, He, Vav, He, and summary and application. Okay, let's get started. Some current trends and some background. By the way, these are not all really current. Even back in the time of Yeshua, there were people trying to say that the name had magical power. So, let's just get some terms put together. The term sacred name refers to the 4-letter name of the God of Israel, Yod, He, Vav, He. It's called the Tetragrammaton in the Greek, which means 4 letters. That became a technical term to refer to Yod, He, Vav, He. All of God's names are sacred, right? So why did the name Yod, He, Vav, He become especially singled out as the sacred name? The emphasis upon Yod, He, Vav, He is based upon the text such as Exodus 3:15 and Isaiah 42:8. Here is Exodus 3:15. Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, Yod, He, Vav, He, the Lord, the God, Elohim, of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. So Yod, He, Vav, He became a name of eternity, particularly a memorial name, or a name that somehow captivated the deep essence of who God is. So when it says, this is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations, that's why we have this issue. Then, in Isaiah, it says, Isaiah 42:8, I am Yod, He, Vav, He, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven images. So, from these verses, it has come to, I'm okay. It has come to some that we should only refer to God as Yod, He, Vav, He at certain times. I don't really think that's what these two verses are saying. I think what these two verses are saying, that this is the name that captivates all of his other names, right? Elohim, El Shaddai, El Elyon, so forth and so on. But this heightened emphasis upon the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, along with the fact that it is the most often used name of God in the Tanakh, right, over 6,000 times, has given rise to spectacular claims among some Messianic groups. By the way, we use the word Tanakh, which is an acronym for the T stands for Torah, the N stands for Nevi'im, which is Hebrew for prophets, and the CH stands for Chetuvim, which means the writings. So it's a way of saying the Torah or the law and the prophets and the writings. Some are teaching that powerful and effective prayer comes only when one pronounces the name when praying. Have any of you heard that? Yeah, okay, it's got its way here too. Here's a quote from John Charles Green. What is his name? It's a self-published book. It is, in addition, also vitally important that we know how to use the names of the Father and the Son as a means of intelligent and effective prayer, as a means of getting positive answers to our prayers. Brothers and sisters, that is wrong. But we'll talk more about why it's wrong. Some say that if a person substitutes translations, like if you say Lord or God or Adonai, that for the sacred name, then you're using the name in vain or even engaging in idolatry. That too is wrong. But here's an example. This is from the Nazarite website. The scripture makes it clear that we are not to use, and then they try to pronounce the name. They pronounce it Yahuwah, Yahuwah's name in vain. But that is exactly what one does when you replace his sacred name with Adonai, which means master, or the Lord, which means master, but is another name for Baal. Calling Yahuwah God or Lord is no different than calling him Allah or Satan. That too, my brothers and sisters, is absolutely wrong. Or some say using the name, which is also in the Son's name, gives greater anointing, especially for the last times. Here's a quote from another website, A Mighty Wind. There is a higher sacred anointing in the Hebrew name of, now here it's Yahushua, and in my name, Yahuwah. Now the end time is nigh, and I warn you to teach others what you now know is truth. So this is some supposed prophet telling us what he believes is true. There is no more anointing, what she believes is true, excuse me. There is no more anointing in our holy sacred names. Use them. There is more anointing in our holy sacred names. Use them. Make no more excuses. During the tribulation, you must call upon my Son's Hebrew name, Yahushua HaMashiach. My name, Yah, is in his name, the name above all names. That, my friends, is wrong. How do we know it? It's easy if you stop to think. What names are written in our Greek Bible that the apostles wrote? How do they refer to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh? Kurios was a common word for Lord. These apostles who were carried along by the Spirit of God and their writings were inspired by the Spirit used a common Greek name. Can I just cut to the chase quickly and then get back to the technical things here? Even somebody who can't speak, even somebody who has no ability to speak, can call upon the name of the Lord. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. It's talking about the character of God. It's talking about his works. It's not talking about speaking letters. Groups that identify themselves under the banner of sacred name are not unified on how to pronounce the name. You will find advocates for Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, Yehovah, Yahweh, and more. So why isn't the pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton obvious? Shouldn't we know how to pronounce this? After all, since the name occurs some 6,828 times in the Tanakh, its pronunciation should be well known. Why isn't it? Why do even these sacred name groups, why can't they figure out how to pronounce it, even though they say that you have to pronounce it to have your prayers answered? The reason that the pronunciation of the name is difficult to ascertain relates to, first of all, the manner in which the Hebrew language was written, and secondly, the scribal methods used to transmit the Tanakh. The manner in which Hebrew was written. Hebrew, like most Semitic languages, was written originally only with consonants. The vowels, while pronounced in speech, were not written. Written signs for the vowels, which we now call nikud or points, were developed by the Hebrew scribes in the Middle Ages, most likely beginning around 500 of the Common Era or later. So these are consonants. Those of you that know some Hebrew, that's a dalet, a bet, a resh, a yod, and a mem. But there's no vowels there, only consonants. When the Masoretes decided to add some things so that people would know the right vowels, they added these kinds of things, and these are called vowels. A shiva, a chametz, a hirik. Those little dots and what looks like dashes are symbols for vowels, so that we pronounce this word devarim. Devarim. They also added accent marks, so you knew which syllable to accent. It's not devarim, it's not devarim, it's devarim. Sometimes these are also called cantillation marks, ta'amim in the Hebrew, because they actually can help you sing the text if you know what notes and sounds to put with these little marks. So, I'm giving you a Hebrew lesson. Have you fallen asleep yet? Okay, all right. And you're even eating. Usually when you eat, you fall asleep, right? Okay, so let's take the word Elohim. There's a Shiva followed by a Segel. There's a reason for that. The reason is because the Aleph is a guttural. It was originally pronounced very deep in the throat. There are still people in Israel that pronounce it that way. It's called a Chad of Segel. Then there's a dot just on the other side of the Lamed. Remember, we're reading from right to left, okay? And so that's an O sound. That's an O vowel. Then we have a dot underneath the Hey, which is an E sound or a high I sound, E, and the Yod goes along with it. Hirik Yod. And so we have Elohim. Now, here's the word Adonai. Do you know that Adonai is used as a name of God in the Hebrew text? It too has a combination vowel at the beginning, a batach. I won't bore you with this. A holam and a chametz. And so we say Adonai. Adonai. Interestingly, Adoni means my master. Adonai with a patach means my lords or my masters, plural. Adonai written with the vowel that's here, a chametz, means only God. It's only used as part of the sacred name. So, what about the vowels on Yod He Vav He? Well, when you open up your Hebrew text, you're going to find a Shiva, and sometimes you'll find a Holam, and you'll find, oftentimes, a Chirik, or sometimes. But other times, when you read it in the Hebrew Bible, you'll find a Shiva, and you'll find a Chametz. Now, if you were a detective, what do you see that's the same with Adonai and the Yod He Vav He below it, and Elohim and the Yod He Vav below it? They use the first vowel the middle vowel and the final vowel, right? But when it's Adonai, they use the first vowel of Adonai and the last vowel of Adonai. You see? So why do we see it written both ways in the Hebrew Bible? I'm going to answer that question in a minute. I just want you to think about it. There were times when the scribes wrote the Tanakh that there were times when they wanted people to read something differently than the way it was written. It's called Karei Ketiv. The primary reason for writing the vowels in the first place was because after the failure of the third Jewish revolt, the Bar Kokhba revolt in 136, the Jewish population was dispersed and the Hebrew language began to be lost as a living language among the Jewish communities. When they were dispersed to Babylon before, they began to lose their language and took up Aramaic, Babylonian Aramaic. When they were dispersed, after the destruction of the temple, the next generation began to lose their Hebrew language, or their ability to speak and read Hebrew. This is common, right? I mean, we have immigrants in the United States of America from Laos and Vietnam and so forth, and usually by the second generation, sometimes third generation, the children can understand the language, but they can't read it, and they can't speak it. By the fourth generation, they almost can't understand it. So in order to maintain the ability to read the Tanakh in the synagogue and within the Jewish community, the vowels had to be written in order to teach people how to read the Hebrew. But since the consonantal text of the Bible was held as sacred, nothing could be added to it by way of a new letter. They counted the letters to make sure that they didn't miss any. They couldn't add letters, it would make everything off. Therefore, a system of dots and dashes was developed to represent the various vowel sounds in the Hebrew language. But this created a problem. The tradition of substituting words for indelicate expressions and using updated pronunciations, other than that was written in the text, would be missed by those who read the text phonetically, but without understanding the meaning of the words they were reading. When I was at the bookstore here, I bought a Bible that's in Tagalog. Well, I can read all the letters. I can kind of pronounce some of the words, but I don't have a clue what it's saying unless I know the verse from the Bible by heart. Okay? So if you took a Jewish person who wanted to read Torah at the synagogue, if they could phonetically read everything, but they didn't understand what they were reading. Even more, if the vowels were added to the tetragrammaton, a person might accidentally pronounce the name of God in a thoughtless or even vain way. So long before the time when the dots and the dashes to represent the vowels was developed, the tradition of substituting words when the divine name was encountered had been set in place to guard against the profaning of the name. Let's take, for example, note Leviticus 24:16 in the Hebrew text, and then I have side by side in the Greek translation of it, which was probably finished sometime around 300 CE. It says in the Hebrew, "And the one who blasphemes the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh shall surely be put to death." Okay, that's pretty straightforward, don't you think? But how did the Septuagint translate it? "And the one who names the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death." What does that tell you? It tells you that by the 3rd century, before the coming of the Messiah, 3rd century BCE, the Jewish communities had already determined that you cannot pronounce this name. If you pronounce it, you might pronounce it irreverently, and that would be the death penalty. So they made a fence around the name, saying, we're never going to pronounce it. We'll substitute a word for it. Okay? Whoever blasphemes the name, but in the Septuagint it says, names the name. By the 3rd century, the Septuagint had made it against all law to pronounce the name. We find the same rule not to pronounce the name was part of the Qumran society, established halakha. Now, you're familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, or you at least know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? Okay, the Dead Sea Scrolls were about the same time as the Septuagint. 200 years before the Common Era. So, 200 or so years before the coming of the Messiah. In one of their rules, they say, anyone who speaks aloud the most holy name of God, whether in, and we're not sure, the text is broken there, or in cursing, or as a blurt in time of trial, or for any other reason, or while he is reading a book or praying, is to be expelled, never again to return to the council of the Yachad. This most likely originated, this text, around 100 BCE. In fact, the tradition of substituting another word when encountering the Tetragrammaton may have been based upon the Torah itself. Look what the Hebrew text is that we have when Moses is speaking. Then Moses returned, went back up to the mountain to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and said, Adonai, why have you brought harm to this people? Why did you ever send me? Note that when Moshe addresses Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, he says Adonai. Okay? So here's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It says, V'yashav Moshe el Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Adonai, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So Moses returned to Adonai, and he said, V'yomer. Then, what do we have? He doesn't use Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, he says Adonai. Now, what did Moses actually say? I don't know. But when the scribes wrote it down, they wrote it down as Adonai, because they did not want Moses to be blaspheming the name. In order to assure that the text of the Tanakh would be read correctly according to the scribal traditions, the Masoretes developed a system of marginal notations called Karei Ketiv. That is, Ketiv means what is written, Karei means what you're to read. And they would mark the word so that when you were reading along, if you saw a little circle over the word, you were to glance over at the margin and it would give you the word that you're supposed to read. Now, that doesn't have to do only with the sacred name. And I don't know if you probably can't see this very well. But right here, I can't even read it very well. This is Deuteronomy 28:27. Okay, you can see it. I mark here, there's a little circle over that word. It marks the word, the word to which the note refers. Over here is the note. And it has the little Hebrew karei underneath. It means read this, don't read that. Now, what are you supposed to read? The note means read Vevet Charim, using the vowels written, thus boils rather than hemorrhoids. And you say, well, why would they do that? Because if you're reading in the synagogue and you have ladies on the one side, or however they were, and children and so forth, they felt it was indelicate to talk about hemorrhoids in a mixed company. So they said, you see what you're reading, but say boils because it's not so offensive. Besides, that word that's translated hemorrhoids can really be translated other things as well. We have all adults here, so it can refer to the private parts. So that was an indelicate expression. So they said, instead of reading that, when you're reading out loud, read this. In some cases, the Masoretes prescribed a perpetual karei ketiv, meaning that some words written were always read differently. For instance, the proper name Yerushalayim. Those of you that have studied Hebrew know that there's something going on here because there's no yod and the final vowel is put under the mem. You're still supposed to read it Yerushalayim, not Yerushalim. It's written Yerushalim, but you're to read it Yerushalayim. They use the old spelling but put new vowels with it. The same with Issachar. Issachar is always written with two scenes. You're only supposed to pronounce one. Well, another one was the third person feminine singular pronoun, he, which means she, but sometimes it's written with a vav. It's still it's not pronounced heave, it's pronounced he, even when it's written with a vav. That means when they don't put the note in the margin every time because there's so many of these that you're just supposed to know there's a few things you always read differently than written. So on the Tetragrammaton, Special care was taken to guard the reader from attempting to pronounce the name. So often, only the first and last vowels of the substitute word were written. Now you see what I was driving at the beginning. The majority of the time, Adonai was to be substituted when the tetragrammaton was encountered. Thus, the first and last vowel of Adonai were written on the consonants of the name. Okay, does that make sense? So you have Adonai and you have Yod He Vav He. See, you have the first vowel, it's the same. You have the last vowel, it's the same. That's to remind you, when you're reading Hebrew and you see a consonant without a vowel, you know something's wrong. Every consonant in the Hebrew has to have a vowel. Consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. You say, wait, there's no vowel on the hey. How am I supposed to read? Oh yeah, that's right. When I don't see vowels, I'm supposed to look over in the margin, or I'm supposed to remember to use another word. Read Adonai. In the Leningrad Codex, which is dated to 1008, it's the second to the oldest full codex we have of the Hebrew text. This pointing of the tetragrammaton occurs 5,682 times. You say, wait a minute, there was 6,800 and some times that it's used. What happened to the other ones? 49 times in the Leningrad Codex, the tetragrammaton is pointed like this, with 3 vowels of Adonai. So sometimes they put the middle vowel in, Adonai. Sometimes they don't. So here's the first vowel, the second vowel, and the last vowel. The same in each case. That reminds you these are the vowels of one word and the consonants of another word. Is that difficult to understand? Right. Well, that was their convention and the Jewish people got used to it. However, what would happen when Adonai, Yod He Vav He are found together? If you substituted Adonai for Yod He Vav He, when you were reading along, you would say Adonai, Adonai. And everybody would think that they were the same name twice. To avoid this redundancy, the tetragrammaton was pointed to indicate that Elohim should be substituted by using the first and last vowels of Elohim. Okay? So, if you have Elohim, Yod He Vav He. Okay, so here's Elohim, first vowel of Yod He Vav He. Last vowel of Elohim is a hirik, same in Yod He Vav He. So when you see Yod He Vav He with those vowels, you're supposed to pronounce Elohim. When you see it with the other vowels, you're supposed to read Adonai. This vowel pattern is found 271 times in the Leningrad Codex. 31 times the middle vowel is also included. Okay? So sometimes it has that middle vowel. A few other vowel patterns occur when a preposition or other particle is attached to the tetragrammaton. Now I'm getting really, really kind of deep into linguistics, huh? Okay, do you want me to continue? All right. Summary. When the Masoretes intended a word to be read differently than how it was written in the text, they would mark the word with a little circle and put the correct reading of the word in the margin. This method is called kareh and kativ. It means kativ, written this way, kareh, but read it this way. The vowels attached to the written form are the vowels that are to be used for the word that is read. So they put the vowels of the word you're supposed to read on the word, and you can look over in the margin to see the consonants. In the case of the tetragrammaton, the vowels written indicate whether to read Adonai or Elohim. They are not the original vowels of the divine name. They are the vowels of the name you're supposed to read. Every Masoretic scholar that I have ever read or ever encountered says, absolutely, of course, we know this has been the case ever since the Middle Ages. No one ever denies that, except for the sacred name people. In fact, there are no extant Hebrew manuscripts of the Tanakh in which the actual vowels of the proper pronunciation of Yod He Vav He are written. None. Zero. Here's the other interesting thing. Yod, He, and Vav were the 3 consonants that were used for vowels. So you really don't know what value to give to Yod He Vav He if you don't have vowels or you haven't been given the information from someone who knows. Now, I don't know if I should skip through this or not. Have any of you heard of Nehemiah Gordon? Yes. How about Keith Johnson, who goes along with him? They put together a large teaching which has gone pretty much all over the world, saying that they discovered the actual pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. Recently, Keith Johnson and Nehemiah Gordon have claimed to have recovered the original pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton by looking at photographs of the Leningrad and Aleppo Codex. By the way, if any of you want a copy of the Leningrad Codex in PDF form, I can give it to you, okay? I've got the whole thing. If you want the Aleppo Codex, you can go online at aleppo.org, and it's all there in beautiful high def. Each page you can see just like you have the ancient manuscript in front of you. It's a wonderful website if you're looking at ancient manuscripts. They based their proposal on the following arguments. They claim that the Tetragrammaton was not a perpetual Ketiv Kare or Kare Ketiv because there never is a time when a scribal note is appended to the divine name. Nowhere in Scripture is there an instance of Kare Perpetuum or a perpetual Kare in which the word written one way but read another way always lacks a scribal note. That's not true. There's no scribal notes on he, spelled with a yod or a vav. At any rate, Nehemiah, I think, should know that, and he probably does. Dismissing the idea that the tetragram was a perpetual Ketiv Kare, that is, written one way and read a different way, they propose that the 2 vowels written in the form Yod He Vav He, that is, Shava and Kametz, are actually the original first and last vowels of Yod He Vav He. They claim that the Masoretes were willing to write the actual first and last vowels of the sacred name because they left out the middle vowel, which assured that no one would actually pronounce the name. Well, guess what? That isn't the case at all. As noted above, the perpetual Ketiv Kare of the proper name Jerusalem, the proper name Issachar, and the third feminine singular pronoun she are all read differently than written, yet never are they marked with a circle, nor is there a marginal note connected with any of them. I don't know why Nehemiah has his degree supposedly from the Hebrew University. He knows this. This entirely undermines their argument that Yod He Vav He is not a perpetual Kare Ketiv. In fact, the Tetragrammaton is a perpetual Ketiv Kare, and the vowels written with it are the vowels of the circumlocution which is to be read. Here's Emmanuel Tove, who was one of Nehemiah's professors. And here's what he says in his book. The constant Kare, Kare Perpetuum, is not indicated explicitly with the Masoretic note, but in these cases the Ketiv is vocalized with the vowels of the Kare. And he says it again in his Israel Yavin, in his introduction. In the case of some words, the form traditionally read is always different from that suggested by the letters. This class is related to Kare Ketiv, but is not marked as such. The leading example is the Tetragrammaton Yod He Vav He. This is well known amongst Masoretic scholars and fully accepted. Their second argument is that the Tetragrammaton does not have the vowels of Adonai, for if it did, it would have been written with a cholim in the middle, with the middle vowel. But it is always written with just the first vowel and the last vowel, without the chad of patak and without the cholim. However, when we check the earliest manuscripts of Scripture, we find that Yod He Vav He is written Yod with a short E or a Shava, He, Vav with a class vowel, He. This is how Yod He Vav He is written in the Ben Asher manuscripts, Aleppo Codex, and Leningrad Codex, which preserves the most accurate, complete text of the Bible. But let's consider these claims. Am I going too fast? Write down your questions, and I'll take them in a minute. Let's consider these claims. It would be consistent with the methods of the Masoretes to use the simple Shava rather than the combination Shava to represent the first vowel. The Masoretes refer to words in abbreviated fashion by writing only the first letter of the word, oftentimes. or the very last and the last letter of the word. Since the Shavah is the first vowel of the combination vowel Chad of Patach, this would follow the same pattern of using the first and last letters as an abbreviation for the entire word. The form Yod, He, Vav, He, with the two little dots at the beginning and the Chametz at the end as the first and last vowels of Adonai. More likely, however, the use of the single Shavah in the form Yod, He, Vav, He came about on the principles of Hebrew phonology. Okay. This is going to get too deep. I'll go through it very fast. Some of you will understand it. Some of you won't. It's not a huge thing, but it's important if we're going to understand this very deep subject of why we can't pronounce. Let me stop and say, if I knew how to pronounce the name Yod He Vav He, I would have no trouble doing it. I would pronounce it with reverence. It's one of God's names. I just don't know how to pronounce it. If somebody very important was coming to my house, say a government official or somebody of high standing and great importance, and he had a foreign name that I couldn't pronounce, the last thing I'd want to do is mispronounce his name. If he was a judge, I would say, Your Honor. If he was the president, I would say, Mr. President. I wouldn't try to butcher his name if I didn't know how to pronounce it. So why should I try to pronounce the name of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords if I don't know how? I know how to pronounce Elohim. I know how to pronounce Yah. I know how to pronounce Adonai. All of those are given to us with vowels, no problem. But for some reason, God did not, in His providence, preserve the vowels of Yod He Vav He so that we know how to pronounce it. So, when the vowels of Adonai were put on Yod He Vav He, since the first letter is a Yod, which is not a guttural, it would have been technically incorrect to place a Chad of Patach there. The simple Shavah was used, therefore, which conformed to Masoretic phonological rules. There were certain rules of what vowels could go with what letters. If the vowels placed on Yod He Vav He actually were representative of the original pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton, what are we to do when Yod He Vav He has the vowels of Elohim? They never talk about that. Let me show you an example. Okay, this is from 2 Samuel 7:19. And it's the phrase, this is the Torah of mankind. Torah Adam Adonai Yod He Vav He. Okay? Here's the Tetragrammaton. I don't know if you can see it or not. If you're sitting up front, you might be able to. Yod He Vav He. Notice what it has. It has a Shavah, and it has a Cholam, and it has Hirik. Why does it have that? Because those are the three vowels that represent Elohim. Why are we to pronounce it Elohim at this point? Because Adonai, the actual word Adonai, comes right before it. Okay? So here's Elohim, and here's the vowels that are on Yod He Vav He. It tells us, pronounce it Elohim. Those are the vowels of Elohim. In fact, Nehemiah agrees that the divine name was written with these vowels so the reader would substitute Elohim. He seems unconcerned that here, as in the form of Yod He Vav He, the initial combination vowel of Elohim is represented by simple Shavah. So he's not being honest with his arguments. Now I'm just going to summarize this. He says, well, sometimes the middle vowel isn't used. And the reason that the middle vowel isn't used, he says, is because if they had put the middle vowel in, they would have given us all three of the right vowels and we would know how to pronounce the name and we would pronounce it and maybe do it wrongly. The only reason the Masoretic scribes would have left the form Yehovah, that is, without dropping the vowel after the He, is because they knew this was not the true pronunciation of the divine name. In contrast, when they saw Yod He Vav He with the Shavah and the Chametz, they knew this to be the true pronunciation of the name and therefore suppressed the middle vowel. But what is the missing vowel? He goes on to say, comparing the two forms, it appears that the missing vowel is O, is Cholam. This means that the Masoretic scribes knew the name to be Yehovah and suppressed its pronunciation by omitting the O vowel. This is confirmed by the fact that the scribes actually forgot to suppress the vowel O in a number of places. Let's consider this argument. It is true that in the Aleppo Codex, the middle vowel on the first He in Yod He Vav He is missing whenever the name is pointed with the initial Shavah and final Chametz to be read Adonai. It is also true that the middle vowel is written 32 times only when Yod He Vav He is pointed with initial Shavah and final Chirik. But this is not the case with the Ben Asher manuscripts in total. For in the Leningrad Codex, the form Yod He Vav with Holim and He with Chametz to be read Adonai is pointed with the middle vowel 44 times. Do you honestly think that the Masoretic scribes forgot 44 times that they wrote exactly everything that they didn't want to write? I don't think so. The Masoretic scribes not only wrote, but they had scribes go back and correct and correct and correct. Here's a picture of Genesis 3:14 in the Leningrad Codex. I know it's a little hard to see, but right here it says, and Adonai Elohim said. Okay? So here's Adonai, Yod He Vav He. And notice it has the Shavah, it has the Holim, and it has the Chametz. It has all three vowels. This happens 44 times in the manuscript. Further, it's clear that the tradition to substitute Adonai for Yod He Vav He predated the Masoretic era. This is proven when we compare Isaiah 3:17 and 18 in the Aleppo Codex and in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, here's the Aleppo Codex. Therefore Adonai will afflict the scalp of the daughters of Zion with scabs, and Yod He Vav He will make their foreheads bare, and that day Adonai will take away the beauty of their anklets, headbands, crescent ornaments, etc. Here it is. You probably can't see it. If you want to, I can show it to you later in the Dead Sea Scrolls. What you'll notice is that here in the Aleppo Codex, we actually have the word Adonai written. But we also have Adonai with a Vav here, written Yod He Vav He. Okay? But why is there no vowel on the Yod? Anybody know any Hebrew around here? Why is there no vowel on the Yod? It's a Vav with a Patach, then the Yod, the He, and the Vav with the Chametz. The reason is when you have a particle like a Lamed or a Vav before a word that begins with Yod, it becomes part of the vowel. When we say to Jerusalem, which would be a Lamed, Le, and Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim starts with the vowel, right? Yerushalayim. But when we say to Jerusalem, we say Li Yerushalayim. The Yod combines with the vowel. Here, the Shavah combines with the vowel of the Vav, which tells us what? They expected you to say Vadonai. Right? I know that Nehemiah knows that. He speaks Hebrew fluently. Here in Qumran, you can't hardly see it, but it has see where I have it circled? It has Adonai in the text, and it has Yod He Vav He written above it. They were already substituting Adonai for Yod He Vav He a long time before the Masoretes came around. And guess what? They have Adonai again exactly where the Masoretic text has it. Let's look at something in the Aleppo Codex. This is where Nehemiah and his colleague think that the Aleppo Codex has always given us the correct pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. Do you see it in here? Is it big enough to see? So that's a Vav, then Yod, He, Vav, He. What vowel does the Vav have? Has a Patach. What happened to the vowel on the Yod? It's absorbed. They expect you to be pronouncing it how? Vadonai. They're not giving you the correct pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. They're following Masoretic tradition and substituting Adonai for it. So you have the Patach, you have no vowel under the Yod. Same thing here. Look at Yerushalayim. Okay? So here's Vav added on to Yerushalayim. The Vav means and. So there's the Hirik, but there's no vowel under the Yod. Why? Because it's absorbed into the Vav. Exactly same principle. What we have here, I know it's very detailed, but what we have here is simply the fact that they followed the rules, and Aleppo Codex and Leningrad Codex both use the same rules. Neither one of them are giving us a supposed true pronunciation of Yod He Vav He. Every time Yod He Vav He is found in the Aleppo and Leningrad Codexes, the Vav is written with Patach, not Hirik. And why? The reason is that the original first vowel of Yod He Vav He is not Shavah. Rather, the scribes of the Aleppo and Leningrad Codexes vocalized the Vav conjunction attached to Yod He Vav He with Patach because they expected the reader to substitute Adonai. They expected you to say Va-Donai. This proves beyond doubt that in the Aleppo and Leningrad Codices, Yod He Vav He was considered to be a perpetual Kareh, and when it was written in this form, Yod with Hirik and Vav with Chametz, the first vowel, Shavah, represented the first vowel of Adonai, not the supposed original vowel of Yod He Vav He. So what's the conclusion? The claim of Keith Johnson and Nehemiah Gordon to have recovered the original pronunciation of the divine name rests on faulty data and far-fetched speculation. The tradition of substituting Adonai or Elohim for Yod He Vav He was not developed in the era of the rabbis, but was ancient, predating the Masoretic era when the vowels were first written in the manuscripts of the Tanakh. The Aleppo Codex, which is the oldest one, 996, attests to this as well, as seen when Yod He Vav He has an attached Vav conjunction, the word and. Therefore, Johnson and Gordon have not recovered the original pronunciation of the divine name. Their proposal is overturned both by the historical and grammatical data provided by the Aleppo and Leningrad codices themselves. Furthermore, their proposal rests upon far-fetched speculation and so forth. Some have suggested that the original pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton was known by the early church fathers. We're going to skip this part. Anytime you find transliteration in the Greek, how did the Greek translate the name Chava? Chava is whom? Eve. How did we get Eve out of Chava? And how did the Septuagint translate it? Zoe. The Septuagint translated Chava as Zoe, life giver. So they were giving a meaning. They weren't trying to transliterate the sound of the name. So the fact that the church fathers tried to represent Yod He Vav He in some of the Greek writings doesn't give us a clue as to how it's supposed to be pronounced. The heart of the issue, God's self-revelation. In the Semitic culture, a name stands for a primary characteristic of the person or a major event in their lives. Think of Avraham. He's Avram at first, but it's changed to Avraham. Why? Because he would be a father of a multitude of nations, and probably this is a play on the term Ham. Yaakov. What does it mean? It means he wrestled with God and prevailed. Who prevailed? God prevailed. Moshe, what did his name mean? I named him Moshe because I drew him out of the water. How about Nabal or Naval? Pay no attention to this worthless man, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. What does Naval mean? A fool. The meaning of the divine name is revealed in connection with God's intention to deliver Israel from slavery of Egypt. The two important texts and their larger context explain the meaning of the divine name. Exodus 3:14, Moshe at the burning bush, and Exodus 6:3, God's promise that Israel would know his name. To know the name of God does not mean to know the letters. It doesn't mean to know how to pronounce it. It means to know what the name reveals about God. Exodus 3:13 and 14. You remember the context. Then Moshe said to God, "Behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moshe, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Well, in the Hebrew, this is what? Ehyeh asher ehyeh. The Hebrew is in the imperfect aspect, which would more literally be translated, I will be whom I will be. Say to the sons of Israel, I will be has sent me to you. The primary issue here is not etymology, not how the word is formed, whether the tetragram was based upon the verb to be. It probably was, but that's not the heart of the issue. The issue, as the context makes clear, is the faithfulness of God to the covenant he made with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. In exactly the way I told Abraham that I would bless him, now I am here to show you that I keep my promises. I don't change. I'm always the same. I will be the same tomorrow and in 1,000,000 years and forever. Exodus 3:15. God furthermore said to Moshe, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. I think it means exactly what I will be who I will be. What does that mean? It equals Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. That's what the name means. I will be what I will be. I don't change. I am eternal. I am the immutable God who keeps his promises. Notice how often in the immediate context of Exodus 3:14 through 15, I will be occurs, the term I will be, Yehieh, exactly the same, occurs in God's promise to be with Moshe. Verse 12 of chapter 3, I will be with you, Ehyeh. Chapter 4, verses 12 and 15, I will be with your mouth, Ehyeh. The emphasis is not upon the essence of being, but upon doing. God reveals himself through his works, which demonstrates his faithfulness, his sovereignty, and his infinite justice and mercy. Even as God promised to be with his servant Moshe, the mediator of his covenant promises to Israel, so in the same way God promises always to be with Israel, to establish Israel as his eternal covenant people. As we said in our earlier sessions, God made no covenant with any other nation except for Israel. This is why the grafting in is so important. To be members of that covenant is not through your genealogy. It's through your faith in the Messiah. God's faithfulness. That's what the name means. He would never forsake Israel. God's sovereignty. How can you say, I will always be what I will be, unless you control the future? Right? So it talks about his sovereignty. He would providentially secure Israel's existence throughout time, for in order for him to keep his word, Israel as a nation must endure. If Israel doesn't endure, God is not God. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is not Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. He says, I will always be the same. Look at the next verses, 3:16 through 17. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned. Pekod, pekadti, infinitive absolute plus a finite verb, which means I am really concerned. I'm ready to visit. I'm concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. So I said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Again, I will be your king, faithfully maintaining my covenant with you. I will be your helper, always ready to come to your aid. I will be your savior, to take you out from under the affliction of Egypt. I will be your shield, defeating the Egyptians who seek to destroy you. And I will be your provider, bringing you to a land flowing with milk and honey. That's what the name means. Was God's covenant name known before he spoke with Moshe at the burning bush? Well, look what it says in Exodus 6. This is oftentimes brought up, verses 2 through 3. God spoke further to Moshe and said to him, I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and I appeared to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov as El Shaddai. But by my name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, I did not make myself known to them. What? Go back and read Genesis. How did God reveal himself to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov as El Shaddai? Each time the name El Shaddai appears in Genesis, it is in the context of God's gift of children. I personally don't think El Shaddai means God Almighty. I think El Shaddai means God. Well, and I don't want you to think I'm irreverent here, but Satan always tries to steal from us what is truly ours. What did all the pagan religions have? Fertility gods and goddesses. Who's the true fertility god? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What's a fertility god? A God who gives children. Right. Genesis 17, the promise that Sarai would give birth to a son. He says El Shaddai. He uses the name El Shaddai. Genesis 28, Yitzhak's blessing on Yaakov. May El Shaddai bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. Genesis 35, the promise to Yaakov. I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations will come from you, and kings shall come forth from you. Genesis 43, Yaakov's sons taking Benjamin to Egypt. May El Shaddai grant you compassion in the sight of the man, so that he will release to you your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. When children are at the point of importance, whether a woman wanted and needed children, or whether children are under duress, we see God being addressed as El Shaddai. Chapter 48, then Yaakov said to Joseph, El Shaddai appeared to me and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous. Every time you find El Shaddai in Genesis, it's connected with being fruitful, having children. 49 of Genesis, from the God of your father who helps you, and by Shaddai who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. So how did God make himself known to the patriarchs as El Shaddai? Remember, he doesn't make himself known by telling them who he is. He makes himself known by showing who he is. By giving Yitzhak to Sarah. By giving Yaakov to Rivka. By giving children to Rachel. God demonstrated his name El Shaddai by giving children to the matriarchs, and particularly to Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel, who conceived only through the special miraculous work of God. El Shaddai reveals God to be the God who gives children. The patriarchs came to know the meaning of the name El Shaddai through the miracles he performed for them in giving them children. Surely the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was recognized and used by the patriarchs. It's found 165 times in Genesis. Note Genesis 15:2. Abraham said, O Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, what will you give me, seeing that I am childless? But the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was not known in the sense of having been demonstrated to the patriarchs. Recognizing the letters and even the pronunciation of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh did not mean that the name was known. God had demonstrated his covenant faithfulness on an individual level to each of the three patriarchs by giving them children. But the meaning of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh could only be known when its meaning was demonstrated on a national level, which awaited the event of the Exodus from Egypt. In other words, the self-revelation God intended to give through his name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh could only be known through the Exodus event. It was in this historical event that his power and covenant faithfulness to the nation of Israel would be manifest. The fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant is realized ultimately in the unbroken covenant relationship between obedient Israel and God. Note, in Exodus 6:7, then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God, and you will know that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. Note how the use Yihyeh, I will be, appears in the prophets with the same emphasis. 2 Samuel 7:14, I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me, the Davidic covenant. Or, in many cases, you shall be my people, and I will be your God. Yihyeh. So what's the conclusion? The divine name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh encompasses God's sovereign intention to fulfill his covenant promises to his chosen people Israel. The meaning of the name is therefore revealed in all that God has done, is doing, and will do to establish his covenant with Israel, and thereby to prove that he alone is God, there is no other, and that he is able to accomplish all of his holy will. To know the divine name is not to know its pronunciation, but to witness his marvelous works and to give him the glory and praise he alone deserves. Now, let me sum it up in this. The Exodus is the story of redemption. It's used throughout the Scriptures as a paradigm for redemption. Think about Colossians. He took you from the domain of darkness and translated you into the kingdom of his dear Son. That's Exodus language. He took you out of slavery and he brought you to freedom. That's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. That's the power to change a life, the power to bring new life where there was none at all. In the Psalms, the name of God is at the heart of Israel's praise. The name of Adonai expresses all the mystery and wonder of revelation, the object of all prayer and praise and reflection. Do a nice study on Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in the Psalms, and you'll see the whole theology of the Psalms. Note Psalm 76:1. In Judah, Elohim is known. His name is great in Israel. At Sinai, God reveals himself as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. His name has been entrusted to Israel. They know it, meaning they have covenant relationship in the context of the name. And they fear it. They love it. They trust in it. His name is called upon, meaning what? You know that he will help. He said, you call and I will answer. People sing his name. They praise his name. People exult over his name. They rejoice in it, break into shouts of joy over it. Does that mean they've learned how to pronounce it? No. It means they have experienced the reality of the name. What does it mean? Redemption. They have been saved from their enemies, sometimes physically, but also spiritually. No one can make use of this name, though God is called by it or control it. It is holy and terrible, according to the Psalms. You cannot make magic out of this name. No way. It is majestic. It is characterized by glory. A frequent Tanakh expression says that when a person or people dies, his or her name or its name is remembered no more. In contrast, the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh endures forever, and his memory or renown lasts through all ages. It is to be celebrated through all generations. His name stands for all that he is and all that he does. Therefore, his name provides protection and salvation. All of life must be lived with the glory of God's name in mind, for his name's sake. Therefore, to call upon the name of the Lord means to entrust one's life to him and to demonstrate this trust through a life of obedience. Note the parallelisms in Psalm 105:1. Oh, give thanks to Adonai. Call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the people. What does it mean to call upon his name? It means to remember all that he has done and to let others know as well. Call upon his name, make his deeds known. To call upon the name means to trust in him for one's deliverance. And it will come about that whoever calls on the name of Adonai will be delivered. It doesn't mean pronouncing the name. It means knowing him as he has truly revealed himself. To call upon his name does not mean to pronounce the name, as though someone who did not know the original pronunciation of the name could not be saved. Even a person impaired in hearing and speech could call upon the name of Adonai by trusting in him as he has revealed himself to them. So this is why I get so excited about this thing. Don't let anybody tell you that the most important thing about the name is how to pronounce it. That is not it at all. Someday we'll know. Someday Yeshua will come, and he will teach us how to pronounce the name if that's what he desires. In the meantime, we know what the name means. He's our God. He has brought us from every walk of life and from all different directions into his people. He's made us one with him. That's what it means. Yes, the original pronunciation is unknown to us. All of the proposed pronunciations are guesses. Even some of these guesses may be close to the original. Therefore, no one who is willing to accept the historical and manuscript evidence should be dogmatic about a particular pronunciation of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. From ancient times, long before the era of Rabbinic Judaism, it was the practice to substitute Adonai or Elohim for the divine name. Even Moses addressed Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh as Adonai. Likewise, the translations of the Septuagint and even Yeshua and his disciples used substitutions rather than pronouncing the name. Present-day claims that some have recovered the original pronunciation based upon new investigations of the Aleppo and Leningrad codices are not supported by the data. In fact, the data controvert these claims. Quite often, the current proclivity among some groups to find and use the supposed original pronunciation of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is driven by a misplaced belief that simply pronouncing the name results in greater spirituality and power in one's life. That, my friends, is idolatry. If you think that by pronouncing a name one way or another way, that somehow you gain something from God that otherwise you wouldn't, that's called controlling God, and that is what idolatry is. God is not controllable. Everything we have by His grace, by His mercy, not because we deserve it or earn it. As with all of the names by which God has revealed Himself, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh offers a particular emphasis upon the overarching greatness of God by being especially attached to His covenant relationship with Israel. God's eternal and unbending promise to establish Israel as obedient covenant people is central to the meaning of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Our lack of knowledge regarding how Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was originally pronounced in no way diminishes our ability to know the divine name, that is, to know God as He has revealed Himself in His name through His works. All of the names by which God has revealed Himself are sacred in the sense that together they give the self-revelation of the Almighty. Even as the Hebrew Scriptures were translated into other languages, Aramaic, Syriac, Greek, and so forth, so the Greek words used in the Apostolic Scriptures to refer to God as well as to Messiah, Yeshua, whether it's Kurios, whether it's Theos, whether it's Christos, were deemed appropriate and used by the apostles. The assertion that using some translations results in calling God by pagan names is entirely off the mark and misunderstands the use of names in the first place. Since we simply cannot be certain about the original pronunciation of the tetragram, it is foolish to adopt a pronunciation that is based on a guess, even if it might be a good guess. If we would hesitate to mispronounce the name of an earthly king when we address him, how much more should we steer clear from mispronouncing the name of the King of Kings, in whose presence we live and move and have our being? We should follow the pattern established from antiquity, a tradition followed by Yeshua and his apostles to substitute Adonai or Elohim or another biblically warranted circumlocution like Almighty or Father in heaven, rather than attempting to pronounce the Tetragrammaton. The common Hashem is also an appropriate term to use in common conversation, since it means the name and simply makes known that one reveres the name, the divine name, but does not know how it is properly pronounced. We should also reckon with the fact that for many Jewish people who have been raised religiously, attempting to pronounce the Tetragrammaton is a grave offense. Why should we offend our brothers and sisters by pronouncing the name in a manner that may well be a mispronunciation? Finally, by way of application, let us commit ourselves to know the name in truth, not focusing merely upon its etymology or how it is to be pronounced. Let us strive to deepen our own faith in God, who has revealed Himself as the Creator, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, who demonstrated by the Exodus event His eternal intention to redeem Israel and to maintain and bring to fruition His covenant promises to His chosen people. Let us praise and magnify His power and majesty, revealed in His wondrous works throughout earth's history. And above all, let us live our lives of thankfulness and devotion because He sent His Son, Yeshua our Messiah, through whom we have entered into a covenant relationship with Him and in whom we enjoy the shalom that surpasses all understanding. Philippians 2, 9 through 11. For this reason also, God highly exalted Him, Yeshua, and bestowed upon Him the name, which is above every name, so that at the name of Yeshua every knee will bow, of those in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Yeshua Messiah is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. What is the final story of Purim? God keeps His word. God is the God who is the covenant God of Israel. All of the enemies of the earth may seek to destroy us. They will be not successful. And I won't... Can we substitute a name for that guy that wanted to hang Mordecai? Do we have to say his name? All right, so as we come now to celebrate Purim, we celebrate Purim because our God we know to be great. He is faithful. He will always be who He said He is, and He will demonstrate it through His great works of redemption.